are just one link in the chain of life. We need to coexist with the rest of the nature if we are, of course, to develop and sustain life here on planet Earth. Of course, the importance of the environment has been spoken of time and time again, but this topic is relevant to us Sri Lankans right now at this moment because in the recent past we have heard much about environmental degradation here in Sri Lanka. How will this really affect our country? Are the leaders of Sri Lanka aware of these matters? We've got with us here today a political figure, of course, with a touch of an environmental aspect to his politics. He is a person who is enthusiastic about the environment, a lover of nature. He is none other than Opposition Leader Sajith Premadasa. Welcome, sir, to our program.
Thank you for having me.
Sir, we've seen, of course, political leaders pledge to protect the environment, but time and time again we have seen environmental degradation so bad that it has now taken root in Sri Lanka. Our forest covers have been reducing over the years. Are you truly an environmental enthusiast? Do you really love the environment?
Certainly I do, but of course people can form their own opinions and judgments by observing practice. This is why Samagi Jana Balawegaya has adopted the Green Charter, an environmental charter, as one of its primary policy precepts, and we announce ourselves to be the Green Party of Sri Lanka, not only through mere declarations and proclamations, but we shall in power exercise a pro-environmental agenda in our policy decision making and implementation.
Well, when we speak about the environment, there is a political aspect involved in it. Politics and the protection of the environment are, of course, intertwined. The environmental degradation that we're speaking of today, it's said to be one of the worst since our country was ravaged by invaders and our resources plundered. Who is really responsible for this level of environmental degradation that we are seeing in Sri Lanka today?
Well, I think we are all accountable and responsible, and I for one would take the lead if there is nobody else left to take the blame initially, right at the outset. I think all of us are responsible. Successive governments ever since independence have embarked on indiscriminate development policies, policies that have not given priority and credence to environmental issues, and it is this fact that we have recognized. We have recognized the importance of environmental protection and conservation, and we hope to make it an integral part of our policy, a policy that will be based on sound pro-environmental initiatives that will benefit this present generation and of course the future generations who will be taking the mantle of our country.
Speaking a little bit about the environmental degradation that is taking place in Sri Lanka, you said that the entire population of Sri Lanka is responsible for this. Is the general population aware of the ill effects that follow destruction of the environment, even if it is for a development project that will benefit them in the short run?
Generally speaking, I believe there is a lack of awareness in terms of the importance of environment in decision making. Let me just give you some examples. I think if we go through the statistics in terms of forest cover, in the 19th century we had an 80% forest cover, which was reduced to 44% in the 1950s, And right now we have a 28% forest cover, but of course it includes the monocrops such as tea, rubber and coconut. So our exact forest cover in terms of natural habitat is much less. There are certain realities that we all have to recognize. What are these realities? There is a direct relationship between forest cover and the greenhouse gas effect and the rise of global temperatures. We have to recognize the fact that we are a country with biodiversity hotspots. Biodiversity hotspots that have been detrimentally impacted in recent times, such as Horton Plains, Singharaja, Anavilundava, Nilgala, Ratugala, to name a few. In addition, we have also seen mass scale loss of habitat, habitat for animals, which have now become virtually irreversible. Good examples are the deforestation that has taken place in Vilpattu, Anavilundava, Somavatiya, and we all know of the disasters that have taken place in Singharaja and the Dahayagala elephant corridor. In addition, what we see right now is the detrimental impact that the environmental degradation that is taking place in our country, where it has on the various cycles, the water cycle, the nitrogen cycle and the carbon cycle. And also we have to be aware of the photosynthesis process and its importance in food production. Now, these are basic environmental scientific facts and realities that we have to live with. However, most have attempted to ignore these realities for short-term profit, immediate gain, lack of attention on long-termism, and fully motivated to reap the fruits and the benefits of supernormal profits. I think we have to change from that type of a mentality. It's highly important that we provide adequate attention to environment centric decision making, and we as a political party, we hope to be the Green Party of Sri Lanka, and we hope to inculcate the major environmental precepts into our policy decision making and implementation programs.
Well, the usual excuse that comes from part of the officials, of the public representatives in our country for deforestation, for uprooting of trees, is development. They say that the people need to live, the people need to make ends meet, the people need these lands for cultivation, and that is why these lands are being released. That is why these forest reserves are being degazetted. That is why the other forests, the circular protecting other forests, is being revoked. Is this a fair justification?
Well, I'm also all for protecting human lives. The only question is, are we going to protect human existence as of now alone, or are we going to ensure that future generations also live in a conducive environment for good living? Here I would like to emphasize the importance of inculcating good governance policies, and we move as a country towards sustainable economic development. There is always trade-offs, opportunity costs that one has to suffer when making decisions. However, we have to ensure that the damage that development impacts on the environment is minimized and, if possible, negated totally. I personally feel that it's high time that Sri Lanka adopted a system of sustainable economic development. Economic development that would retain the carbon absorption rates, economic development that ensure that the greenhouse gas effect and its impacts does not have on the atmosphere and on ecosystems, a development methodology that would promote carbon sink and carbon sequestration, which are important facets of good environmental management. Those are the advantages that one accrues from high forest density and high forest cover. Just look at the present situation right now from an environmental context. It has resulted in human-elephant conflict, which has led to very high numbers in terms of fatalities, both among human beings and among the elephant populations. Because of the loss of habitat due to indiscriminate development methodologies, due to human encroachment of the natural habitats, we have this human-elephant problem, which successive administrations have failed to resolve. I think it's high time that we acted in a intelligent, realistic and appropriate manner.
Mr. Premadasa, since you brought up the human-elephant conflict, we here at News First have been following the human-elephant conflict and the suffering that it inflicts on the lives of both the people as well as the wild elephants alike. Now, the Gum at the report that we prepared through the Gum at the Door-to-Door initiative highlighted the magnitude of the human-elephant conflict that is faced by the people, especially in villages, poor villages, people who are just trying to make ends meet. But Sri Lanka, like you said, successive governments have failed to address this issue. The go-to solution for this issue seems to be the erection of electric fences.
I don't think that alone is the sole solution. We have to have an overarching integrated policy of sustainable development approach and models. And within that system, we have to have a nationwide land use planning program. In addition to that, we have to ensure that proper environmental impact assessments are conducted. Assessments that are not dictated by politicians or various political ideologies, which presently has caused indiscriminate deforestation and unqualified encroachments into wildlife and nature habitats. Rather, we should have a scientific approach to ensure that forest cover lost in one place results in forest cover gain elsewhere. We have to be cognizant of the fact that in the midst of the human-elephant conflict, there is also a huge effort on the part of those wielding financial and political power to embark on a land grab program of massive scale, of monumental scale. I would invite the people of our country to come and have a look at what is happening in Suryaveva and in Hambantota. It has become ground zero of environmental Armageddon or environmental terrorism, where those wielding enormous amounts of power have used their initiatives to grab 200, 300, 400 acres individually, and the human-elephant conflict, the major wildlife and human crisis has been used as a front cover for this massive scale, mass scale land grab program to go ahead with. And this is a very sad state of affairs. And we in Samagi Jana Balawege, as the Green Party of Sri Lanka, as a party that promotes environmental protection, we will in due course in the future form our own environmental protection brigades throughout the country to ensure that environmental conservation, wildlife protection has its proper priority in the national agenda in terms of development and conservation.
How important is environmental protection? Of course, this is what we are discussing on World Wildlife Day. We will be back after this short commercial break. Opposition Leader Sajith Premadasa, you called the Samagi Jana Balawege the Green Party of Sri Lanka. Many of the governments that have come into power in Sri Lanka have promised the general public that environmental protection will be a priority. However, we see when the government comes into power, despite the policies that they have announced, there is always a certain level of environmental degradation taking place. Sometimes it's more alarming than the others. Let's speak in the current context. You spoke of a large-scale land grab. You said that the Hambantota district is ground zero for this environmental Armageddon. The current government that is in power follows a policy of environmental protection. It was mentioned in their manifesto as well. I know you don't speak on behalf of them, but this was a part of their manifesto. So where really is the issue here? If the policy is not the issue, then how does the land grab take place? Is it the law? Is it the enforcement? Where is it?
I would like to emphasize there is a massive gap in terms of declarations and practice. You have many a laudable proclamation, declaration, press conferences, inclusion of very, very attractive proposals in manifesto. But there is a massive policy failure in transforming and translating policy ideas into practice. I can tell you Samagi Jana Balawege is a breath of fresh air in the political context. We are an emerging political force with progressive ideas. We have constructive proposals in the environmental arena that would promote sustainable development. Development that would look at not just the present generation, but give due credence and priority for future generations. We are a futuristic party. As a futuristic party, we give a lot of time for environmental planning, planning of scenarios, planning environmental emergencies that we have to face as a country. This type of strategic planning is lacking in the present political context. And as I said before, we hope to be the path-breaking political movement that translates and transforms political ideas, environmental ideas into practice. And please note that we will implement our proposals within a given time span with a specific timetable for our action program.
Mr. Premadasa, you said that there is a huge gap between laudable policy statements that have been presented and what is really happening in practice. You have presented, or the Samagijana Balavege has presented, the environmental charter. What is the assurance that you can give the general public that this charter will be implemented, that there will be no gap between your policy on environment in this charter and what you will do in practice?
Samagijana Balavege, as the Green Party of Sri Lanka, have formulated a green initiative, an initiative that was presented to the Sri Lankan people during the presidential elections. It was called the Environmental Charter, where the basic pro-environment policies would have been enacted through parliamentary legislation and statutes. We also had 3 flagship projects, Project Leopard, Project Elephant and Project Blue. 3 projects that would have initiated the major governmental initiatives to protect the endangered species, specifically the elephant, leopard and the whale. People of Sri Lanka can be rest assured that this environmental charter will become a reality. It will happen, and the 3 major specific projects will also be initiated and implemented according to a specific timetable. However, I would also like to impress upon the people that the implementation of these programs does not mean that we are anti-development. We are pro-sustainable development. So, mega irrigation projects, the construction of international ports and airports, these are development necessities for countries. But these mega projects have to abide by existing environmental law. We have seen time and time again, in order to implement grandiose political schemes, the system has failed. The system has failed to give due recognition to established environmental legislation. There have been major violations of the Fauna and Flora Protection Act many a times. They have ignored the environment policies and policy perspectives. Announced policies have been grossly violated just because the whims and fancies of major political decision makers, the political appetites of the politicians had to be satisfied. We will not have that type of indiscriminate action within our administration. We will have checks and balances in our system which will ensure that sound policies that are in the national interest will be promulgated and promoted. And we consider sound environmental policy as being an integral part of our national security interests. It is an integral part of it, and as such we will ensure that we have sound policy decisions that will be implemented to the letter.
Mr. Sajith Premadasa, you are the opposition leader. You are the main force that keeps this government in check. You are the clarion cry for the general public to rally against this environmental destruction that is taking place in Sri Lanka. What do you think the people of this country can do at a time like this? What is your message to them?
We as a progressive, constructive opposition We shall always support and applaud policies that are in the national interest, but policies that are deleterious and inimical to national interest, we shall vehemently oppose. Having said that, the political context has changed in the aftermath of the presidential and parliamentary elections through the power concentration that has taken place with the 20th Amendment. There is scarce space available for parliamentarians and political actors to impose democratic restrictions on the present administration. But having said that, people support, people power, the momentum that gathers with grassroots based programs will of course inhibit
like the opposition leaders' mobile program, grassroots level programs.
Right. The mobile service program is a basic program that has been initiated to listen to the people's opinions and views, but this arbitrary decision making and implementation through this huge concentration of power that has taken place in recent times in the political structures of our country, they will not have their way all the time, because we will ensure that there is adequate people power that will act as a restraint against abuses of power that has resulted in virtually perpetual deforestation, indiscriminate felling of trees, the encroachment of animal habitat, which has resulted in conflicts with buffer zone communities and societies. We will ensure that that we impose people power and all available democratic tools and instruments to ensure that we have a sound environment policy that will present the future generations environmentally sound motherland.
Well, it is definitely in the interest of the general public, not only today's generations, but generations to come, that the environment in Sri Lanka is protected, and that we stop speaking, or we don't have matters to speak about when we start discussing environmental degradation in Sri Lanka, that this environmental ecocide, as they call it, Armageddon of the environment, is put to a stop. Thank you very much, Opposition Leader Sajith Premadasa, for joining us on our program today. And thank you very much, of course, to all our viewers out there for tuning in. Until next time, it's take care and God bless.